Continuing what I started with my last few videos, I wanted to continue the trend of doing season previews by doing the Knicks next, especially after I just did one for the Timberwolves. Of course, this video will follow the format of the other season previews, so I'm not going into the Cat trade immediately, but I will say that I do think that this trade makes sense for the Knicks overall. But I'll go ahead and start by reviewing the Knicks season last year before getting into their off-season moves, and then their season outlook this year. Now, going into last season, the Knicks were not seen as one of the favorites to win the East like they are this year. This is mainly because their team looked a lot different on opening night in 2023 than it will in 2024. They still had Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Isaiah Hartenstein, Julius Randle, and Dante DiVincenzo. Roster aside, though, they came off a somewhat disappointing second-round exit of the Heat, where they failed to capitalize on Jimmy Butler playing on a sprained ankle for most of that series. I would say the vibes going into the next season from the general public was that this was a second-rate Eastern Conference contender that was likely a second-round exit. The Bucks and the Celtics were the heavy favorites, while I would say the Knicks and the Heat and the Sixers were seen as a clear tier below them. And I was in agreement with that until they made the OG Anunoby trade in mid-season. Getting rid of Quickley and Barrett was a winning move for the Knicks because they were too ball-dominant to reach their potential in a team with Brunson and Randle. And sure enough, this paid off considering that they went 20-3 in the regular season with OG, good enough for a 71-win pace in the 82-game season. They also had a defensive rating of 107.8 with him, which would have made them the number one defense in the league just by that metric. Again, this was a 23-game sample size, which is over a quarter of a regular season worth of data, so these numbers are nothing to be overlooked. I'll get more into how important OG is to this team later, but back to the season review. This trade allowed them to jump from 4th in the East to 2nd in the East. Granted, the Sixers slid when Embiid got injured, and the Bucks slid when they decided to hire Doc Rivers for some reason. But nonetheless, they were able to beat a healthy Sixers in 6 games, but then lost in 7 to the Pacers after losing almost half of the rotation to injury throughout the series. It was unfortunate that we were robbed of a Celtics-Knicks showdown, but the Knicks did enough to convince many that they were a serious contender going into this season. And then out of seemingly nowhere, they traded for Randle and DiVincenzo for Cat. And while the initial reaction to this trade was why, I think anyone who was paying close attention to the Knicks this offseason know this trade makes a lot of sense for the Knicks side. Looking at their roster before this trade, it was clear they needed a center very bad. In fact, I was almost about to make a season preview on them where I was going to say they need to make a trade for a center by the deadline. Sure enough, they did, and I think this move ended up adding more to the Knicks than it did subtract. Firstly, losing Randle is a piece they could live with, sacrificing, considering that they already have OG and McCall in the starting lineup as wings. Meanwhile, their starting center on opening night was either going to be Jericho Sims, Precious Achiuwa, or even OG. This is because Hartenstein played himself out of his contract, and Mitchell Robinson was going to be out until January at least. So even if they were to hold out until January, they'd only have a month or less of games to see if Mitch can return to form. And even if that were to pan out, their backup center options were pretty poor, as I had just previously listed. Even center issues aside, I think that how Randle fits into this team as a ball-dominant player and a poor spacer from 3 was a valid concern going into this season. It also doesn't help Randle's case that the Knicks look so polished as a team from top to bottom without him in the last playoffs, while Randle has had his woes in the 3 playoff series he's played for in his career, all being for the New York Knicks. So with Cat becoming available, they were able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by giving Brunson more space to work with on offense, and also addressing their center problem going into the season. He's undoubtedly going to fit into this offense much better than Randle since he can play off-ball and space the floor much better. In my Timberwolves video, I said that Randle's playmaking abilities would be much appreciated by the Timberwolves conversely, but as for the Knicks, they were not in much need for playmaking. Now, I will say that I do think that the Knicks' offense has taken a significant step back in playmaking with all the moves they made in the last year, but I think their defensive improvements and better roster construction outweigh that, especially with Brunson almost becoming a one-man offense in the playoffs last year. This team doesn't necessarily need another star playmaker next to Brunson since they have so many good all-around offensive players from top to bottom. Their offense should flow even better with Cat spacing out the floor as well. So while offensively, I think this is a move that is a significant improvement, even factoring in Dante exiting, they did lose overall depth by trading a 2-for-1, and Cat is not exactly the center I would pick to anchor a defense. Looking at their overall depth first, I think they're going to be fine overall, especially with how good their starting 5 is. We saw with the Celtics last year that a subpar bench can indeed be carried by a dream starting 5, and we see the Knicks and the Sixers kind of moving in that direction this year. Now, on the Knicks, I would see their playoff rotation including Brunson, OG, McCall, Cat, Mitch, McBride, and Hart for sure, which makes 7. And then you have people like Cameron Payne, Jericho Sims, and Precious Achiuwa fighting for that 8 and 9 spot. So they're not the deepest team in the East, but the other East contenders also have questions about their 8 and 9 mans as well. So I think the 2-for-1 trade is not that damaging bodies-wise, but defense-wise, I'm a little bit more shaky on. Cat is not a rim protector, and he's not a good post defender in a vacuum. We did see with the Wolves in the last few years, they were able to mitigate this by having Cat guard the center, with the Gobert playing help side, and this honestly helped Gobert as much as it did Cat. But only a select few centers in the league can pull this off in Gobert's position with 100% confidence for me. Mitch is not in that category, but he's still a really good post defender, rim protector, and rebounder, all things Cat struggles with. Now, if the Knicks are playing the Celtics in the playoffs, this is fine because Kristaps will just stay on the perimeter. But if they match up with the Sixers, this is going to be very important if they can replicate what the Wolves used to do against Jokic. It's something I think is very possible to pull off, but I'm going to have to see it in action without a top-of-the-line rim protector as part of this equation to believe it. Mitchell Robinson aside, I think OG is someone who will do wonders for Cat defensively. We saw in the playoffs last year he played excellent help defense against Embiid, and even took Embiid on himself periodically. I think should it come down to it in the playoffs, putting OG on Embiid is a viable backup plan, and his help side defense on Embiid could be enough to not worry if Mitchell Robinson will be up to the job, or even healthy for that matter. Even if they did lose Hartenstein last year, OG Anunoby makes a big enough defensive impact himself to turn this into an elite defense. Think Draymond Green with the Warriors. The Warriors have the luxury of never having an elite rim protector because of Draymond, and I think the Knicks will have that luxury with OG as well. And this is all just a contingency in case Mitch isn't healthy. So overall with this Cat trade, I do think that this makes sense overall and has increased their ceiling as a team as well. Yes, they did lose their edge in the East with their depth, and yes, Cat on defense is always going to be a question for any team he's on, but offensively this will open up so much for the Knicks. Their X factor for the season will be if Mitch Robinson can get healthy and play well alongside Cat when need be, but even then OG Anunoby is a versatile enough defender that it may not even matter. And as for the Knicks overall, I haven't even mentioned that they added Mikal Bridges this summer too. But I won't dwell on that because I think everyone already knows he's one of the best plug-and-play players in the league. Overall, I'd have to say that the Knicks are a first-tier contender in the East based off of their roster improving overall and how well they played with OG last year. If you want to say the Celtics are better because they're more tested, that's fine. But I'm fully confident that this Knicks team can battle with anyone in the East this year. Whether they get over the hump is going to depend on how well this team can gel together and how well Cat fits in defensively. Only time will tell. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say. And thank y'all for watching. I guess I'll see y'all next time.